This special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board will come to order on March 16th, 2021. The time is 4:01 p.m. The board will now move to the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice President Sinowski, will you please lead us in that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board will now have a roll call, starting from the chair's left.
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hartwell.
Patty Beckman.
Julie Sinowski.
Jan Michael Greenberg. All 5 board members are present, and there is a quorum. The board will now move to agenda item 4, approval of agenda. Are there any amendments? Are there any motions? The chair moves to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Board member Beckman seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to agenda item 5A. The governing board may vote to convene an executive session for the following: discussion and consideration of the superintendent's mid-year evaluation pursuant to governing board policy CBI, evaluation of superintendent, and ARS section 38-431-03A1. The employee has been notified in writing in accordance with the statutory provision. Pursuant to policy CBI, if the superintendent's contract is in its first year, this mid-year evaluation will not be a comprehensive evaluation, but will be used to allow the board to communicate its perspective on the superintendent's performance to date and to allow the board and superintendent to communicate on performance matters. The chair moves that the board vote to convene in executive session. Is there a second? Board member Hartwell seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board convene in executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to convene in executive session. The executive session of the governing board is now reconvened. The time is 6:10 p.m. The chair moves to adjourn this executive session of the governing board. Is there a second? Vice President Sinowski seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board adjourn this executive session at 6:10 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The executive session is adjourned at 6:11 p.m. The board will now move to agenda item 6, and we will reconvene the special meeting of the governing board at 6:11 p.m. The board will now move to agenda item 7, information discussion. Item A, the governing board may discuss the superintendent's performance. Do any board members have any public comments concerning the superintendent's performance? Vice President Sinowski.
Yes, I would like to thank Dr. Menzo for coming to Scottsdale Schools. You have proven to be level-headed. You provide calm during chaos. You're caring. Your intent is to improve the public relations and image of SUSD through relationship building. You aspire to be an evolutionary leader and make improvements in educating our SUSD students. So I really appreciate all that you bring forth to us.
Do any other board members have comments? Board Member Beckman.
Well, since we did just meet about Dr. Menzel, I echo all the statements that Board Member Sinowski said, and thank you for all the time and energy you put into this first year. I know it's not even over, but it seems a long time ago that we interviewed you back in March of 2020, and you couldn't have had any idea what would be coming your way. So I appreciate the effort and the caring for our students and putting them first.
Thank you.
Do any other board members have any comments about Dr. Menzel's performance? I will just echo Board Member Beckman and Vice President Sinowski's comments. Reviewing your performance-based pay metrics, the 3 leadership goals that we set out with Dr. Steve Joel, as well as item CBIEA. Personally, I think that your performance is at a very high level, high standard. And I think that this district is extremely lucky to have you, and I hope that it benefits from your work for many, many years.
Thank you.
The chair moves to adjourn this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified District Number 48 Governing Board at 6:13 p.m. Is there a second? Board Member Hartwell's seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board adjourn this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified District Number 48 Governing Board at 6:13 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The special meeting is adjourned. Don't go anywhere, though. The general meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board will come to order. The time is 6:13 p.m. Vice President Sinowski, will you please lead the board in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board will now have a roll call starting from the chair's left.
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hartwells. Patty Beckman.
Julie Sinowski.
Jan Michael Greenberg. All 5 board members are present, and there is a quorum. The board will now move to agenda item 2D, approval of agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda as presented?
I would like to pull consent agenda item I, approval of amendment to the IGA with Arizona Department of Economic Security for transition from school to work service.
Are there any other amendments to the agenda as presented? The chair moves to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second? Board Member Hartwell seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve the agenda as amended. Is there any further debate? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to agenda item 3A, public comments notification. Those wishing to address the governing board on consent or non-agenda matters need not request permission in advance. However, you must complete a blue or white card available by the double doors on the outside, and please present it to the board secretary, Ms. Gladys Wagner, before the public comments section. There is a 3-minute time limit, and the time will be displayed on the board, boards. The board will now move to agenda item 4, student and staff recognitions and celebrations. Dr. Menzel.
Good afternoon, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, and governing board members. As you well know, this past year has presented our district teachers and students with never-before contemplated challenges. I'm confident in saying that in every respect, we've risen to those challenges, not only succeeding but excelling. Dr. Sackos, our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, joins us this afternoon to tell of one such fine arts student from Desert Mountain High School. Dr. Sackos.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Menzel. Good afternoon, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, governing board members, and Ms. Wagner. It is my pleasure to introduce to you this afternoon Tristan Davenport, and I'm not sure if Tristan was able to make it down from her play practice from Desert Mountain. There she is. She's in the cloud with us. All right. Let's see Tristan. Hi, Tristan.
Hi.
Hi. Glad you can join us. So Tristan is a junior at Desert Mountain High School, and her theater teacher, Miss Marilyn Mumau, is also on with us as well. Warm welcome. Hello. Tristan is an outstanding student. When she is not taking AP English class, honors classes in Spanish, chemistry, and math, an advanced theater class, and a history class, Tristan is an active member of the Desert Mountain High School Drama Club, serving as the club's treasurer and honor thespian. If the pandemic had not occurred, you would have met Tristan for the first time last year at this time. As over spring break, and for the second year in a row, Tristan won the English-speaking Union's Phoenix Regional Shakespeare Competition, hosted by the Southwest Shakespeare Company. Congratulations. For it, students prepare a Shakespearean monologue and on one of their great playwrights, 154 sonnets. Students are graded on both their understanding of the text and how they portray that through performance. The competition was conducted virtually, and for it, Tristan prepared Shakespeare's Sonnet 104, and this scene from As You Like It, in which she portrays Phoebe, a young shepherdess who is tricked into marrying someone she doesn't love. Jonathan, please roll the video on her audition. Hi, Jonathan. I think you might be expecting a live performance, Tristan. Hang on. Here we go.
Scratch thee off the pin, and there remains some scar of it. Leaning but upon a rush, with cicatrix and capable in pressure, thy palm some moments keeps. But now, mine eyes, which I have darted at thee, hurts thee not. Nor I am sure there is no force in eyes that can do hurt. Thank you.
That was amazing, Tristan. Miss Mumau, would you like to add anything about your stellar student? And you may be on mute.
Can you guys hear me?
We can now.
Yeah, I've adored working with Tristan these last 3 years. She's unbelievably dedicated and talented. Any project you give her, she just goes in full force. I know last year she kind of did the Shakespeare. She's like, well, I'll just kind of try it out. And then I think she really found a passion. In addition to this ESU Shakespeare competition, she also competed in our Arizona Thespian competition, utilizing that Phoebe monologue, and she also received the Superior from Arizona Thespians in the monologue category and qualified for nationals in that competition as well, which is in the summer. So she's pretty remarkable.
Thank you, Ms. Mumau. Tristan, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
All right. Would you like to sing us something or just say something?
I haven't prepared anything, but I don't know. Thank you so much. I've loved working with you too, Muma. And I don't know. Like she said, I definitely have developed a passion for Shakespeare through this competition. It was something I never expected, but it's just something. It's fun for me, and I think it's a unique talent to have, I guess. But I definitely want to continue doing it into college. I'm hoping to study abroad in London to focus a little bit more on Shakespeare. So we'll see where I go.
All right. Thank you, Tristan, and thank you, Ms. Mumau, for the encouragement and direction you provide this budding actor and all of your other theater students. We will be sending both of you a recognition coin, like the one you see here in my hand, to mark your dedication to your craft and to this occasion. One last thing. The National Shakespeare Competition will be conducted virtually again this year. Voting for the winning performance will be online. So we will be sure to share the link so all of you can vote for this very talented Desert Mountain High School student. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, Dr. Sackos, and best wishes to you, Tristan, in the virtual National Shakespeare Competition. We look forward to flooding the website with votes for you. Staying with the theater theme for just a moment, we've learned today of another high school's recent theatrical achievements, Chaparral High School. I'd like to congratulate the 17 members of Thespian Troupe number 203, led by theater teacher Ed Camo, for the superior rating it received for its virtual live one-take production of The Monologue Show from Hell. It's appropriate this year. And that was in the Northern Arizona Festival of Theater Regional Competition. So congratulations to... Turning our attention to athletics, we also want to applaud several of our high school teams that competed during spring break in their sports state playoffs. Congratulations to the Chaparral, Coronado, and Saguaro boys soccer teams, and the Chaparral and Desert Mountain girls soccer teams, and the Arcadia, Desert Mountain, and Saguaro boys basketball teams. Nothing has been easy during the pandemic, and that includes training and competing in high school sports. These student athletes and their coaches are to be commended for exemplifying SUSD's athletic credo of fostering a culture of sportsmanship, respect, and character. Moving on to the state semifinals, in fact, they're playing at this very hour, are the Saguaro and Chaparral boys soccer teams, so they will not be watching this board meeting. Tomorrow, the Chaparral and Desert Mountain girls soccer teams also play semifinal matchups, so good luck to our SUSD teams. And lastly, on the subject of athletics, we want to recognize Desert Mountain High School Athletic Director Steven Cervantes for having been elected by his Arizona School District peers as the AIA's 5A Conference Northeast Valley Region Athletic Director of the Year. That is a great recognition indeed. We want to thank Steven for his hard work and dedication to the Desert Mountain students.
Dr. Menzel,
Yes,
do you mind if I add in with some breaking news?
absolutely.
Just received a text from Dr. J at Arcadia. He wanted to let the board know that Arcadia won the state championship for POM.
Always happy to celebrate our students' success. It's why we're in this business. But I do have one more recognition tonight, but I'm going to go to the main podium, and I'm going to ask Michelle Pabas to join me up front, please. All right, last but certainly not least, I have the distinct privilege of being able to personally and publicly thank Michelle Pabas from Honor Health Her title, I think, is Vice President of Community and Government Affairs. Is that right? For her amazing partnership. I first met Michelle back in July on Zoom in one of our meetings talking about COVID response in the community. At that point in time, I learned that she is an alum of Scottsdale Unified School District and one who also has had the benefit of learning under the guidance of Dr. Creekguard as a middle school student. So she's got deep SUSD ties. She's also a Paradise Valley Unified School District parent at the present time. Her willingness to share information about what was happening with respect to COVID from the hospital's perspective, available at any time of day or night to provide information and guidance, has just been absolutely essential to us in terms of informing the decisions that we've made as a district along this challenging journey. In November, our conversation started turning towards what happens when the vaccine is here and how do we ensure that our teachers are going to be able to get vaccinated. And while we didn't have all the answers in those conversations, what I knew without any question is that Michelle was on top of it, working with all of her connections in the county and within the hospital system to be able to ensure that we were able to do what we could for our Scottsdale Unified School District staff. Words cannot express the depth of my gratitude for Honor Health's effort to ensure that our SUSD staff and PVUSD as well were able to receive the Pfizer vaccination over 2 distinct weekends. The process was relatively easy, and Michelle was working late nights and weekends to help those who were struggling to get appointments. And I remember texts and calls, and if you just send me those names, we'll get them signed up so that they can get the vaccine. As a result, nearly 2/3 of our Scottsdale Unified employees have received the Pfizer vaccine, both doses, a tremendous step forward in ensuring the health and well-being of our staff. Tonight, I would like to present Michelle with our SUSD Challenge Coin, which is presented to those who exemplify excellence. We are so grateful for your partnership. Thank you. I would like to invite any of the board members to share your words of appreciation because I know that you share my sentiments in terms of how much we value what you've done for us, Michelle.
Board Member Hart-Wells.
Yeah, just a sincere thank you for your cooperation and extending a hand to our community and our teachers in particular and staff. It was really an excellent example of what collaboration looks like and to the benefit of everyone in the community. So thank you so much.
Any other comments?
I think we all thank you.
Yes.
I mean,
I just want to express my gratitude for the partnership as well. This is why I love working for Honor Health and being a product of SUSD. This is what community is all about. And the fact of Dr. Menzel has been an amazing asset for Scottsdale. We're so lucky to have him. Like you said, we started this journey back in July, and you better believe when the first phone calls I got was him when those vaccines we knew were coming. Honor Health started our journey back in August, believe it or not, planning for those vaccines. We had so many different challenges and opportunities throughout that, including even just getting those ultra-low temp freezers. But very proudly, we were one of the first sites to open in Arizona in December 17th. And we knew that just doing phase 1A healthcare workers had been so successful. We wanted to continue to be able to serve our community, school personnel, law enforcement, and all those vulnerable populations. So again, thank you for your willingness to partner. Thank you to so many of you that came out and worked. I was joking with Dr. Guerin last time I saw her, we were wearing plastic ponchos. Dr. Menzel was the muscle, checking names at the gate too. And I do say you've got a phenomenal superintendent. I felt fortunate to work with him. I did laugh one week and I said, who's trying to work longer and harder, you or I? But we got the job done. And thank you again on behalf of Honor Health for the partnership and our continued partnership moving forward, both in workforce development and serving our community.
Thank you.
The board will now move to agenda item 5, superintendent's comments.
Well, thank you. I'll try to keep these brief, but the first thing I want to share is that the city approved the IGA for the internal audit function earlier this evening, and so we will begin our partnership with them with respect to the internal audit function. I just want to be sure to pass that information along. 3 other important points I think that we should discuss briefly. First, yesterday marked a significant milestone in our pandemic response. You may recall, and Board Member Beckman, you mentioned, it was a year ago at this meeting when the board approved the contract for me to become the superintendent. And schools had shut down the day before, and kind of the whole world turned upside down. And yesterday, all of our students returned to a full day of in-person learning who wanted and needed that option for the first time since that shutdown a year ago. It's pretty exciting to see what's happened. It's been a long and hard climb, but I'm truly grateful for the work of our dedicated staff as we've navigated all the twists and turns. It's been the most challenging environment for all of the people who work in public schools to navigate the uncertainty, the unknowns. But every time that a new challenge has been thrown out there, our staff have stepped up to the challenge and done what needed to be done for the benefit of our students, and I'm grateful for that. Secondly, voluntary COVID testing. Yesterday, last night, we sent out the waiver form to our parents of middle school and high school students, 14,318 to be exact. 1,104 of those were in Spanish. And the goal here is to enhance our mitigation strategies. We talked at our last meeting about the layered mitigation, the recommendations from CDC in terms of surveillance testing as best that we could in terms of how we can operate safely in a full-day instruction. So we sent out the waiver form. Preliminarily, it's only been out for less than 24 hours, but we had about 430 responses so far in terms of signing the waiver and turning it back, about 3% of the total parent population. We need more than that in order to be able to implement a surveillance testing strategy. We've also heard some concerns from some parents. They don't want to sign it, and I think that's where it's important to underscore that this is a voluntary process, not something that we're mandating. But it's part of enhanced mitigation strategies so that we can keep our schools open. And if we're able to identify asymptomatic cases and isolate early, it helps ensure that we don't have spread on our campuses. So to that end, we have had a number of very thoughtful questions from parents who haven't signed the waiver, but they are considering doing so if they get answers to other questions. Among those include who's doing the testing, what will the testing be like, what's the frequency of the testing, and all of those are appropriate questions. At our last meeting, we talked about a number of the options, and there are three that really have surfaced as possibilities for us. The first is pooled testing, which we discussed previously. Ginkgo is a company that's doing it for Madison Elementary and one that we're looking at potentially working with if we choose to go that route. The benefit of it is that, at least as it's structured right now, there may be no cost if there's dedicated federal funding for it. And so that would be a positive for us. The downside of the Ginkgo approach is that there's a second step process. So if you have a pool that's positive, those individuals, and it's up to 25 in a pooled sample, those individuals would need to quarantine for the 10-day period or produce a negative result in order to be able to return to school. So that's one concern. In communicating with the Madison superintendent over the break, they have not had to quarantine any. They didn't have any positive tests yet. The uptake in terms of parents signing the voluntary waiver was slow, but started to pick up over time. So it's one of the things where we can learn from a district that started doing this a bit before us. The second option is to just go the direct testing route. And in that regard, Embry offers a service where they would actually come to our schools and be able to do testing of students that have signed up to participate in this voluntary process. And those results then would be given in a 24 to 36-hour period of time, but it wouldn't be pooling. It would be you pull a certain number of students, and then those test results are returned. And if someone does test positive, then that individual would be isolated, and we'd implement our contact tracing the way we do with any other positive case that may have been on campus. The third that we're looking at is Bridge Diagnostics. Bridge is based out of Irvine, California. They do both the pooled testing and the direct testing if you have a positive within the pool. And so the benefit of Bridge is that you get both combined. So the pooling allows for some efficiency in terms of getting to scale. But then if you can isolate where the positive is within that, you may not have to quarantine as many people. There are costs associated potentially with all three, although it might be possible that one is getting a separate federal funding. Right now, we estimate that the cost will be somewhere between $33,000 and $90,000 to test between 10 and 30% of our students. We know that 10% is a pretty low bar, but we also don't know how many of our parents are going to sign the waiver. And that cost is estimating a period of time over 6 weeks. And so we had a conversation, our COVID specialist and our CFO this afternoon about what are the procurement requirements, what are the other steps that need to be put in place. And so the plan would be to bring forward a recommendation to the governing board on April 6th that we could then implement starting the week of April 12th. It would give us 6 weeks of implementing this enhanced additional mitigation strategy. And in part, it would be predicated on, do we have enough parents signing up in terms of participation? And secondly, monitoring what the conditions are with respect to COVID spread in our community. The trend data has continued to be positive, although we can't take anything for granted. As you're watching around the country and around the world, you see little reversals in the trends, and so we want to make sure we're continuing to move in the right direction. All of this is in our efforts to ensure that we can finish the fourth quarter strong. We've got all of our students who want and need to be back in person for full days of instruction. We're continuing to provide online learning opportunities for those students who need it. And as the governing board discussed at our last meeting, we just want to make sure that we're looking at every angle to ensure the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff as we finish this school year. And so that's kind of a quick thumbnail in terms of where we are on that project. The third thing that I just want to, again, remind people is that we're really serious about looking to the future for Scottsdale Unified School District. The strategic planning design team has met twice. We've got our third meeting tomorrow. We're really honing in on what it takes to ensure that our students are prepared to be successful in the future. And a future-ready student has to be prepared with a different skill set than what was required in the past. And so as a design team, we're working to address those issues. We're looking at how do we benchmark against the top performers across the country and around the world? How do we ensure that the system of education here in Scottsdale Unified is designed in such a way that it produces those outcomes for all of our students, regardless of where they live, regardless of which school they attend in our district? Our goal is to ensure that every student has that opportunity to achieve their full potential. So while we've spent most of our year focusing on navigating the COVID pandemic, the ability to turn our attention to the future is really energizing in a positive way. And I think that as we begin to reach out to the community to get feedback to draft vision statements, and then we move forward the next steps of the process, there will be opportunities for additional engagement, and I think that will help bring our community together as we focus on the future.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Are there any quick comments on anything that we were briefed on? The board will now move to agenda item 6, public comments. Do I have all the public comment cards? We have one speaker tonight, Melissa McCusker.
I'm very tall, sorry. I'm going to adjust this. Just let me know when I may begin.
You may begin whenever.
Okay. Good evening, President Menzel, Governing Board President Greenberg, and Governing Board members. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I am here on behalf of the Tierra Feliz North community. We live adjacent to Chaparral High School. And my husband and I have 3 children in the district. One goes to Cherokee, and our twins go to Cocopah Middle School. We chose Scottsdale Unified School District because of the schools. We live in the 3 Cs because we chose to make that commitment. As a result, we have a beautiful home. It's on an acre. It happens to be right next to the baseball field. And the baseball field currently has no lights. Much to our community's surprise, this was approved by the governing board in January. I don't believe any of our community members were present at the governing board. I have myself spoken to over 97 community members in Tierra Feliz. Absolutely not one of them is in agreement with this. We are in complete opposition. It will affect our property values. There are multi-million-dollar homes in our community, and now we will be blasted with light. We have no street lights. We are a dark skies community. There are absolutely no street lights. What will happen is it will change the dynamic of our community. It will also affect our property, traffic. Currently, we have parents that park on the sidewalk to watch the baseball game. They actually back up onto the sidewalk to watch it over the fence. The entitlement of the donation that came for this seems very surreptitious. The fact that no community members were allowed to speak before it was approved also seems surreptitious. I would ask the governing board to reconsider this. You have an entire community. I know the community has emailed you. I know many members of our community have emailed you. This is not an appropriate relationship to have with a community that has been there since 1973. Again, not one community member attended a governing board meeting. There was a meeting on January 7th that was supposedly a solicitation of public input. What it was a sales pitch from the lighting company that was actually building this. At no time were we asked of our opinion. We were just told how great the lights would be, and that games would happen until 10 p.m., and that there was a great line of trees that actually was adjacent to the baseball field that would help block the lights. Those are my trees. Please reconsider the decision. I know the community would really appreciate it, and we appreciate the partnership with Scottsdale, and we hope it's remedied. Thank you.
Thank you. In accordance with ARS Section 38-431-01H, I just want to clarify to the comment that, to the criticism that the board did not solicit input. The approval occurred at a regular meeting, at all regular meetings of the governing board. We have a public comment section, so the members of the public were permitted to make public comments on this. Thank you. The board will now move to agenda item 7A, information discussion item, acceleration of learning update. Dr. Menzel.
Thank you, President Greenberg and members of the governing board. I'd like to invite Dr. Guerin to the podium. We have a team approach to addressing what our plans are for acceleration and recovery of learning for the summer. As you know, there's been a lot of work that's been taking place, and in prior meetings, the governing board has indicated an interest in kind of getting an update on our progress. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Guerin.
Thank you. And I did have to move the microphone way down. So, good evening, President Greenberg, Vice President Sanowski, governing board members, Dr. Menzel, Ms. Wagner, and cabinet and guests. Tonight, we are here to present an acceleration and recovery of learning plan focusing on our summer approach. Understanding that recovery from the pandemic will be a lengthy process, and it will need to focus on both academic goals and social, emotional, and behavior goals. The triangle on the left represents a graphic of a cycle of determining student need, analyzing the data, implementation of intervention, and evaluation of if it is working. This cycle of assessment will help us answer the question, how are the students and how do we know? It is so important for us to understand this about each student, both academically and social emotionally, so we can help them recover from this trying last year. The triangle on the right illustrates that each student will have different needs, and we will have to address that with an equity lens. We began planning acceleration and recovery before we received our ESSER funding, knowing that we would need to provide extensions of learning throughout the summer. This is so important as students are going to want to continue, especially those that have not been able to socialize with other students as we continue to take steps back into full learning. This will be a fantastic opportunity for our students. We began our planning and posted positions for K-8 supervisors and teachers this week, and high school postings have already been listed, and we're already receiving applications for those positions. Hiring, training, curriculum design, all of that will continue through April. We're focusing on a project-based approach. So we really want rigor, inquiry-based, with interventions embedded into the programs, so that it's not just drilling remediation, that students are engaged in project-based learning and exploration and are having fun while we are focusing on specifically what they need. Invitations will be sent out in mid-April to students that we've identified that need specific programs. And then if space is permitted, if space permits, we'll open it up to all students. We have to balance to see how many teachers are interested in teaching. We understand that the staff has been exhausted through this last year, and we're asking them to come back again this summer. So we're going to see the interest, see how many students are interested, and develop program capacity based on that. So we will be responding as we're building, which has been a trend throughout the entire pandemic. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Hagegat now so she can tell you about our elementary focused programs.
Thank you, Dr. Guerin. Good evening. Today I get an opportunity to share with you about our Elementary Summer Boost program, which will enhance what we're currently doing to make sure that our students are receiving the interventions and enrichment beyond that school being over. We want to make sure that our student identification is based on an assessment that gives us accurate data on how student proficiency is. In this particular case, for ELA, our identification includes the use of FastBridge, and FastBridge is an assessment that was adopted through committee work. We wanted to have the input of our teachers and really understand that the screener was going to work for all of our students. And so we adopted that in January at a board meeting, and we were able to start that implementation, which is going really, really well. All of our elementary principals are very aware of which students are currently a high risk, some risk, or low risk. And the number that you see here of 1925 is what we currently have as of January assessment. We know that that number may be less once we get the spring assessment results, and we may need to invite less students that are here, but we wanted to cover everyone that we know as of today. Also, we will use other relevant data, such as common formative assessments that our teachers put in place, as well as teacher recommendations, so that we don't miss any of our students. Our area of focus in elementary is going to be ELA, and we have a project-based learning that will take place as the core. We want our students to be engaged with the curriculum as they continue to get their interventions and enrichment. We are going to have small group instruction to address specific needs, as well as have the opportunity to enhance through the use of social emotional practices, because we want that to also be a component of our program. So it'll operate a little bit like specials, where students will be able to do their core, their interventions in small groups, and then their social emotional learning. We will be able to have consistent curriculum, assessment, interventions, and key to this is our progress monitoring. We will continue to use FastBridge and make sure that we have that fidelity of implementation along with the accountability. Our dates are June 7th through July 1st, Monday through Thursday. They are in selected sites. We don't have all sites open, and that'll be something that will come to you at a later time as we're still making decisions on those. And transportation is going to be decided based on what the need is, so that we're able to really work with our transportation services so our students can access these programs. I also want to share with you today about the FastBridge progress monitoring. And what we have here is the students are going to be monitored twice. Once already we had, and then we're going to have it again in the spring, and then in the fall we will see what the progress was from our summer school efforts. We want to make sure that we are allowing that growth to be measured. And when you see here, the dashed lines represent the goal for student growth. And so when you see that they are on target for that grade level performance, you can also see here the interventions for the students, and they show that positive growth. And we are able to see through this example the period of time, so we can really hone it into that summer program so that we know what were the impacts of the summer program as we continue to monitor our students. I want to turn it over to Dr. Sackos, and she will share with you the middle school and high school programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hagigat. So for middle school, we are going to be expanding on our Summer Bridge program that historically has focused on math. Similar to what Dr. Hagigat explained, we are going to continue to utilize a research-based intervention called iReady. iReady is something that came along with our textbook math adoption a couple years ago and has really been beneficial for our campuses and our students during the pandemic of needing to assess where they are. So in the winter, we took a look at the students that were 2 or more grade levels below in math. And you'll see here that there were 1,524 students. And that is about out of approximately 4,850. So that is 33% of our middle school population that we really need to focus on and help bridge those deficits in mathematics. I just want to tune in a little bit to what Dr. Guerin talked about in the introductory slide about those targeted interventions. They really need to meet the individual needs of students. And the best example that I can give you is that of perhaps an ear infection. Oftentimes, amoxicillin, penicillin doesn't work for an individual. They need to go back straight to the Z-Pak. And I share that with you because not one size does not fit all for our students. And by us analyzing this data and looking at what is the prescribed intervention for this student is how we're going to make our biggest gains. And that's exactly what our middle schools have been doing so far. And that's what iReady does. You go through the assessment, it identifies the standards that you're missing, and it prescribes a program to help you practice and master those standards. I mentioned earlier that this summer will be an enhancement. So typically, we focus on our incoming 8th graders and 9th graders, but this summer bridge will include 6th and 7th grade as well. And while the iReady's primary focus and summer bridge primary focus is mathematics, there will also be additional supports. And I'll share some of those supports a little bit later on the slide when I talk about social emotional supports as well. The dates, locations, and transportation is parallel to what high school, which I'll share in a couple slides as well, but we intend on offering a session in June, a session in July. We plan on having program sites within each learning community and also have transportation available through drop-off pickup locations. Again, very parallel to what we do with high school that I'll share in just a moment. So this is an iReady progress monitoring sample. At the top of this report, you can see the standard and skills being assessed, along with the overall performance of the class. There are also resources to help teachers with their next steps working with students. Below, you can see the average score on the assessment and the number of students who are proficient, progressing, and beginning in the area. At the bottom, each student is listed, their overall assessment score, and their answer for each question. Green-filled circles indicate correct answers. Half-filled yellow indicate partially correct answers. And red unfilled circles represent incorrect answers. And so the data dashboard that's available on iReady, both for the use of teachers and administration, is quite impressive, and they've been really making some progress gains that we will be excited to come back and share. Of those 1,500 students, how many we were able to increase their proficiency. Specific to high school, summer school, in addition to our counselors continuing to give ongoing advisement to kids on their 4-year plan of study, The identification method for summer school, which will be enhanced this year, is by looking at students who have a D, F, or incomplete. With that, what we did is we pulled the data at the end of first semester, and there were 2,192 unique students, so this doesn't repeat. If I'm failing more than one class, it doesn't repeat it, but we had over 2,000 students across all high schools that were receiving a D, F, or incomplete mark. Student grade improvement from spring to summer is how we're going to be able to assess the effectiveness of the program. Naturally, the teacher provides a grade for the students that's based on mastery of the standards, and they use their common formative assessments and other assessment measures to determine that. But that's what we'll be looking at in terms of measurements of effectiveness, is making sure those incompletes turn into completes with satisfactory understanding of the standards, not only to finish the school year strong, but in preparation for next school year as well. So summer school, there's a number of reasons why students historically have taken summer school, and I mentioned some of them: completing a credit, a course credit, replace a poor grade, or enrichment. And by enrichment, I mean students who are in specialized programming that need to get a couple of the classes out of the way, most often elective classes. And students might be in the International Baccalaureate program. They may even be going to EVIT, East Valley Institute of Technology, where that takes up 3 periods of your day. And so you have to take some of your other classes in advance to be able to fit all of that in your 4-year program of study. We have 2 sessions, June and July. The dates are listed. The summer school is typically Monday through Thursday, with the one exception of the July 5th national holiday. And it runs from 8 to 1. We incorporate breaks, and all students are provided a lunch. We're very happy to be able to provide summer school free of charge for SUSD students. There will be a $25 registration fee. And if there is room in our summer school, which is really based on the number of teachers, then we can open it up, as we have in the past, to out-of-district students who would pay the regular fee of $200 per course. We do have our bus hubs, as we have in the past, that have been successful in getting kids to summer school. What's going to be different about this summer school, because we knew if we wanted, again, to make substantial change and get results, we knew we had to do some things differently. So first and foremost, we're very happy to be back in person. We'll offer in person and we'll offer online. And we are increasing the amount of social emotional supports and academic supports during that time frame. So on Wednesdays, for instance, our lab sciences have to stay afternoon for lab. We're looking at additional transportation routes. Hopefully that'll work, where students can stay later, and even if they're not in the lab, and be able to get that support from our staff. So we really have to, again, go back to some purposeful Tier 2 interventions that meet the needs of the student. And part of it is just having somebody there to help them organize, to time manage, and so there's going to be some intense support for our students. And then lastly, we need to make sure that we have our data readily available for all of our teachers, so that they know the roster of students that are coming into their class. They have a good idea of where the discrepancies are in their learning, so that they can go back and really reteach some of those objectives and standards that perhaps students are not getting. So looking at that whole class instruction, that Tier 2 targeted instruction, and then that individualized instruction. So some of you know I love my pyramid, so I could talk about it all day, but that is our approach to meeting the needs of all students. So with that, we know that while we strive every day to meet the academic needs of students, we also have to pay attention to social emotional needs of students. And what I'm going to share with you tonight is a very high-level overview of our Arizona Youth Survey data that I've been talking about, that we do every 2 years, that's administered by the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission in conjunction with Arizona State University. But before I get into that, other data sets we use to look at that tiered approach to behavior is our office discipline referrals, we call ODRs, and our attendance data. It's important to note that our office discipline referrals are down, but that data is really skewed because there has been limited peer social interaction where you typically see that antisocial behavior happening. And so I would be, it wouldn't be right for me to stand up here and say, yay, our ODRs are down, when really that is by the nature of our kids have not been in school the 100% of time as in times past. And then the attendance data. Our attendance, the number of students with 10 or more attendance absences, that obviously has increased over time because we've asked students to self-quarantine, we've sent students home to quarantine who have been ill, et cetera. So that data is skewed as well. The Arizona Youth Survey that I'm going to talk about very briefly, 30,000-foot overview. I promised I would not talk all night because this could be a whole study session, and Dr. Menzel wouldn't give me a whole study session. It still has its limitations as well. I don't want to say that this does not have its limitations because we did start to administer this in the spring of 2020. Many of our schools completed it. However, once we closed our schools, there were many that could not, and then they had to reopen it up in the fall of 2020 and even in the spring for us to finish our sample size, and that was around the state. So it does have its limitations too because of the time it was administered. And also, obviously, the limitations with kids not being around peers, and then our online school students were not in this group. So with that, we look at several things. One is adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs. We were happy to see that they put this back into the 2020, as it was not in their 2018. But that looks at those experiences, such as perhaps a divorce, those traumatic experiences that really impact our kids. Incarcerated family member, death in family, things of that sort. And so we did see, and I should say that the red arrows are moving in the direction that we don't want to see, and the green arrows are moving in a direction that we do want to see. So with the adverse childhood experiences, the overall group, and I'm looking at this is all 8th, 10th, and 12th graders together, 57% of them identified at least one ACE. Experts are starting to talk about the pandemic and the impact on students, and they're also saying that this is likely another ACE, except for most of these were taken at the onset of the pandemic, or prior to the pandemic. So we have to look at how we meet the needs of students through trauma-informed care. Risk factors, we see those decreasing. This is within family, community, and school. So there's several categories in which connectedness to school, connectedness to family. We like to see those risk factors decrease, so we saw that. However, we saw protective factors decrease as well. So, and again, you look at the subcategories of family, community, and school. The overall key findings, these are the main areas listed here. The lifetime substance abuse, 30-day substance abuse, for instance, on the decline. And within each of these areas, there's multiple substances. So lifetime substance use, we'll see it for marijuana, alcohol, marijuana edibles is new this year, cocaine, a number of them. I don't want to list all of them, but so you see multiple areas, and it's interesting to see that in all of them there was a reported decrease from our students, same way with the 30-day substance use. Gang involvement was down. In delinquency, there's a number of different identified delinquent behaviors. The one that did show a slight tick increase was gambling, online gambling. Problems behavior at school, again, multiple problems behavior that we saw a decrease. The increase was either threatened or injured with the weapon. The handgun use, victimization, and attitudes, we saw that decrease overall in that category, but the one area is the perception of students is that they responded higher than they had in 2018 or 2016, that it would be cool to be seen with a gun. Violence exposure and dangerous driving, we saw a decrease. So last thing I want to mention about this is SUSD has participated in the Arizona Youth Survey for at least, from the onset, I believe. And so the data that we have here are overall SUSD data, as would any other report, have the 3 years, 2016, 2018, 2020. So it's every 2 years. So that's a lot in one slide. But again, that just kind of gives you an idea of what we have to look at in order to meet the social emotional supports. So my last slide, not sure which one to do here, lists many of those summer supports. A lot of these we have been doing throughout the school year. We began virtually. Many of them now are being done in person. You can see a list of K-5 supports, 612 supports. I want to note our community referrals is really critical. We have a mental health partnership with many of our Scottsdale providers, like an Honor Health, that we can refer the students to when they get to that tier 3, the things that we really need, we cannot support with our own staff. And then what we really saw some favorable feedback on this year is the SEL support for staff and community. So that's been being offered to by our social workers, and they have received some favorable feedback. Ms. Cron is in the cloud later on if there's more specific questions about the systematic SEL summer supports, but we do ensure that, like you would academically, that these are research-based, and they are primarily based on the Cheryl Watkins curriculum, which doesn't matter if our social worker is running a group, if our support services provider, Jewish Family Children's Services, is offering a group. They follow the same curriculum, and we do make sure that we measure effectiveness by pre and post survey data. So with that, and yes, Kim, I left this mic right at our height. We're about the same height.
Thank you. And to wrap up our presentation, we want to acknowledge additional summer learning opportunities. We have a gifted summer program focused on Title I students. Our English language learners will have a specific program that they can focus on language skills. Schools that have received a 21st Century Community Learning Grant will have designated summer programs. In July, there are some Jumpstart programs. One is Beyond Move On When Reading, that really targets and focuses on reading intervention that has had some great success. Some sites are hosting Jumpstart programs for kindergarten students to get them acclimated to their campus. Innovative Minds is another program we're excited about that offers project-based learning. And then there's unique site-specific programs. Some of them are new, and some they've had every year. So this comprehensive approach to continuing learning for our Scottsdale students is so important this year. We've taken a braided approach to optimize all our funding, and that is we're collaborating from department to department, looking how we can blend our funds, optimize our grant money to ensure that we can really have a focused, detailed approach to acceleration of learning, to targeted interventions, to ensure that we continue our recovery from the pandemic throughout the summer. And we'll be very excited to continue to update you specific to the targeted students that we focused on and how we've made the recovery. What's really exciting to me is that we're using the same assessments that we're using this year, in the summer, and in the fall. So it will be a continuous picture of growth and actually tell a story for each individual student. In that way, we will be able to answer the question, how are the students and how do we know? Our approach to learning acceleration and recovery is based on meeting children where they are and providing them with what they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any board members have questions or comments? Vice President Sanowski?
I would like to just add that I really love that you guys are going to be including a systemic SEL element in the summer school offerings, the summer learning offerings. And I also greatly appreciate that aside from the registration fee, that this will be free for Scottsdale students this year. There was an issue of concern on slide 9 that the issues of threatened, injured with weapon and increase and would be seen as cool with gun, with the gun. I would really like for us to consider the SMART curriculum. I believe Dr. Sakos is familiar with it through a presentation last year, maybe the year before, with Moms Demand Action. I think it could be universal across all grade levels. And I do believe that's also free. So I think that might address some of that issue. Thank you.
Are there any, Board Member Beckman, apologies.
All right, so my question may be for Ms. Cron, if she's in the cloud. Regarding the SEL supports, I appreciate them, but I do have a question with regard to, I'm looking at a presentation from 2019, and it's almost the exact same supports. So I would like to know what is different right now in our COVID environment with having these different tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And the second question with that is the summer supports that we're putting in, how are we implementing them? How are we identifying these kids in summer and managing the supports and making sure they are getting to the children in a summer school environment versus what we're doing in the regular year? And if she could kind of walk us through the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 is for all students, as you said, it's like PBIS. The tier 2 is like, I think, 15% more of targeted students, and then tier 3 is specific referral. If we could just take 2 seconds to talk about that and talk about what's different in a COVID environment that we are offering for our students.
Shannon, you there? I don't know why we look up, but. I've texted her as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go. Were you able to hear the question, Shannon?
It was muffled. I heard Ms. Cron and I heard tier 1, tier 2. I'm sorry.
Well, I will let Board Member Beckman share again her fabulous understanding of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
Well, I don't know about fabulous, but I'll make this as condensed as I can. Ms. Cron, thank you for this. As you know, I've seen this probably before, and I've worked with you, and you've been wonderful at explaining it. But I have seen it before in 2019, and I would like you to explain what is different that we're doing in this COVID environment versus what we've always done, because a lot of this seems like our normal SEL supports.
So in regards to some of the tier 1 supports, we've really amped up our PBIS programming supports, looking at data, reinforcing those consistent expectations, provided a lot of kind of that tier 1 coaching, to schools from a district level specialist. So really, really providing, again, just kind of amping up those supports. Same with Stanford Harmony this year. Our 6th through 12th grade students have never had a tier 1 social emotional learning curriculum. So this year we have created, very easy to use videos for our staff, our teachers to implement in the classroom. They are actually, a short PowerPoint presentation with a voiceover, so the teachers don't even have to feel like they're experts in the curriculum. It's readily available to them. There's lessons that go along with it. So that is new for our tier 1, 6th through 12th grade. In regards to, the tier 2 type of support, we've tweaked those student assistance program groups to both be in person and then virtual, trying to kind of really meet the needs of the students. That virtual, we're having a hard time getting students to log on and connect with. I think that was shared at the last meeting. So in some of those situations, we've also provided, more, we call it solution-based counseling, where it's a short series of counseling where our JFCS specialists, our social workers are meeting with students, identifying a goal, and then working with them more intensely. It could be a small group, it could be more one-on-one. And then the same thing, with our high school, 6th through 12th grade students. So again, really kind of tweaking those supports. What we don't want to do is offer a million different programs without being able to offer the district support. So we're really trying to hone in to those evidence-based programs, programs that we know work with our students, and then tweak them to match the needs of our current, environment. Make sure that we're able to provide supports to, our students that have been participating online, our students that are participating in person. We've offered a lot more lunch bunch groups this year, especially for our students that are in EDL or SOL, where they too have that opportunity to just come together and connect. And it might be a fun game that they're, playing, or it could be just an opportunity for them to engage in discussion because, they are at home, so they don't have that opportunity to interact on a daily basis with their peers. So again, really just taking, our current, evidence-based, programs and just tweaking them to make sure that they're meeting the needs of students during COVID.
Two more quick questions that tie in with that you raised. Did we open it up to more? The tier 2 was supposed to be 15%, I believe, before. Are we broadening that to a higher percentage of kids, or are we leaving it at 15%?
So it really is based on, the school. If you have more than 15 to 20% of your students in need of tier 2 support, it's really a tier 1 issue. And so that is where we're working with individual campuses to, implement additional supports that would be school-wide. So if attendance is an issue, for example, putting in a booster where we're reteaching those expectations, acknowledging students for being on time, or, in class, perhaps like doing something fun to motivate them. But it's really, that's where you have to go back to that tier 1 and address it on a school-wide level. So some of our campuses will have more students, that are, if they have 25% of, their students that are having a difficult time with attendance, we would go back to that tier 1. Some of our schools might just have, a 4 to 5% of their students that are, having a difficult time with attendance, and we may put them on like a check-in, check-out type of intervention. So it really is, school by school based on their needs.
Okay, last question. In tier 1 typically, and I think this is poignant given COVID, we used to do the signs of suicide, the school-wide presentation for 9th through 12th. Are we doing that again for tier 1?
So that is something that I hope that we can move towards now that we are back in school, full day. It was something that was not recommended that we do early on in the pandemic. Just when we have to make sure that we are able to see every single student that day. We've worked with our counselors, our social workers, to help identify students. But yes, that is something where we've actually talked about putting it on the district testing calendar. So we know that it's being done, every single year at all of our schools, 6th through 12th grade.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. And the only thing I want to add that may be different moving forward is we, of course, were the recipients last year of the school safety grant with the 3 social workers. The governing board was gracious enough to put in their budget 2 more social workers, so all 5 high schools could have one. And I'm not sure if we're ready to do the announcement yet, but SUSD is a recipient, again, a successful recipient of the school safety grant, and we're adding more social worker staff. And so we're able to bring down that support to middle schools as well, and then, of course, for elementary. So I think that increasing capacity and training of individuals has been most critical. And then, of course, we've reduced the counselor ratio to 375 to 1 versus 350 to 1. So once we really get back, the students are going to be able to see more individuals. There's going to be more individuals on campus to be able to deliver those services.
Thank you.
Board Member Hartwells.
On the summer bridge directed to math for the middle schoolers, could you please go back over how this is different than what's already been offered? You did note that it's expanded, although I wasn't clear how it was expanded. And if you could maybe be more specific than just the phrase supports? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, I can talk about the supports, and you could ask Cheryl to drill down a little bit since she's done most of it. So the additional supports would include the social emotional supports, as well as some of the executive functioning skills that we want students to have. So whether it's the time management, the organization, those important approaches to learning that they need to have as well. And then we do have Ms. Redner, who has led the Summer Bridge for the last several years and can speak more eloquently than I can around the vast differences moving forward.
Cheryl, are you there?
I am here. Good evening. Right, so we have expanded it. We have extended it to our incoming sixth graders, so we'll be working with our elementary schools as to recommendations to our fifth graders. Last year, or 2 years ago, we expanded our seventh to invite our seventh graders in, and then our eighth graders or ninth graders are also included. We also have several hub schools that will be providing that service, and again, transportation will be provided, which is also an extension.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And the students, they'll be invited also in mid-April? That was the timeframe you had mentioned?
Yes.
Is that true for all of these?
And another difference is the iReady program is new. So the identification based on one common measurement throughout the district is a new piece. And that we will be measuring it with that one common measurement is also a new piece to the program.
Okay, great, thank you.
And if I could jump back into that, Dr. Guerin, you're absolutely right. And the nice thing about that is it's an extension of what's been going on actually over the last year, almost 2 years now with our math adoption. So it's consistent, and then it'll be followed through next year as well. So I really think we'll be able to look at that data on a consistent basis.
And yeah, to that point, thank you. You noted that the students who have been identified are roughly 33% of the middle school students who are 2 or more grade levels below their at level math. That's a really large number. Is there an anticipation of having some rubric for outputs at the end of this summer so that there might be some continuation interventions offered in the fall in the event that not all, presumably the goal is all the students get to grade level? What does the support network look like? And maybe that's being built, I appreciate your comment, everything's kind of being done as we move along here.
No,
But
actually.
I'm sure you've thought about that, if you could talk to that.
The great part, thank you very much, it's great questions. The great part about using the assessment that goes with the math adoption program that Ms. Redner led that adoption is that the assessments will continue into the fall and the prescribed interventions will follow. So it will not just be a one and done program. It will be truly continuing the program, but with a more targeted, focused approach in the summer. And then that assessment will be given in the fall again to all students. So we'll truly be able to understand the impact.
Okay, great, thank you. Going back to what Dr. Sacco said about the kind of the social emotional learning components, which I can imagine would also, particularly at this age group, involve the parents, the community, the families. What interaction is envisioned through this bridge program with the families of these students? Again, that 33% is a large number. So kind of like what I've seen in other presentations, there have been a parent component to success. And so is that something that's envisioned here, or?
Go
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I first want to say that of the students identified, our schools have been in contact with many of these families to let them know where they are and the goals that they're working on. And the students are as well involved in looking at their progress over time. So we will extend that communication to our families and those that participate in the Summer Bridge. We'll make sure that the teachers are outreaching to say, here's what we're working on, here's the time spent, here's the progress that you're making, because we absolutely need to make sure. When we talk about implementation of something with fidelity, sometimes it's that independent practice at home. And so we'll need our parents to understand how important it is to maximize and have them really focus on that independent practice if we're going to see results. Because we talk about fidelity of a program, they're all prescribed and they talk about duration of time, frequency, and to really see the max benefit. It's like sorry with all the analogies, it's like a weight loss program. You know, the more you implement it with fidelity and you have all the components in place that your trainer recommends, you're going to see results. And so that's what's really important for us to see results, is to make sure that we're maximizing the intervention itself, and that, of course, is a partnership with our parents.
Agreed, and I'll just point out, I noticed that you have the Title I funding up there, which of course requires a parent component in the funding deployment anyway. So presumably that some of that percent of the Title I funding could be used for those wraparound services that we know are so important to help the students. And I guess I have a very similar kind of perspective on the high school summer school. It sounded like it was going to be summer school, which I know is open now to be registered, much like previous summers, with what I noted was increased SEL. That was the additional
Well, we're going to be able to
enhancement.
increase personnel who can focus on SEL as well as those executive functioning skills that I talked about, as well as academic support. So for some students, it's really about being organized, time management, getting through the assignments, and it's just those, what we used to call, or some people still call it soft skills. I think they're very hard skills and critical skills that will have more staff to be able to individualize and do targeted groups or work with families, make the calls, here's where we are, they're missing this assignment, and really work in partnership with the families to make sure that our kids are being successful and doing what they need to do to move through the program.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all this work. I really, really want this to be successful for our kids. What a year for everyone, right? So thank you for all the hard work that you're putting into getting this infrastructure built through the summer so that our kids can continue to accelerate. The last comment I will have is also on the Arizona Youth Survey. I have spent a little time in the past digging into that data, and the trends that you were showing, there's a lot in that protective behavior phrase you used. You had a lot of information on one slide, so you didn't have it unpacked there. But I will point out one of the components of protective behavior is a student's perception that the community is invested in their success. And that's been a declining number from our kids, not just here in Scottsdale, but across Maricopa County for too long. So that bothers me. And I think that these kinds of initiatives and those wraparound services to help our students, hopefully we'll start to see that kind of data take a turn for the more positive. I'll also echo Board Member Cianowski's comment about the handgun violence. That is also a number. The perception that a gun is cool, the exposure to violence with a weapon, those are also numbers that have been for several years now going in the wrong direction. And so I'm familiar with the Be Smart program too. Would encourage that to being something that we take a little look at too. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
and thank
again
you for
all your
that
work.
comment, and absolutely, it's going to take us a while to unpack all of this with all of our high schools, our principals, assistant principals, counselors, to really go back and again, we have to evaluate, redesign, and so that is what we'll continue to do.
Well, and this has come up several times in the context of depression and other kinds of mental health struggles of our students as a result of the pandemic. So I think that it can manifest itself in something a lot worse, in something more fatal. And I think those numbers are unfortunately an indicator that it might. So we take that very seriously. Again, thank you for all your work.
Are there any additional board member questions or comments? Board Member Lindsay?
I'll be quick. First off, thank you guys for answering our questions on such short notice. Appreciate it. On the Summer Boost program, do we have the sites identified yet? Do we know timeline when?
So Dr. Hagegot is working on that with her principals right now and with transportation. but we're going to have them centrally located. We're looking at potentially 3 sites that students would have the ability. We also have to find who has the room. There's so many programs going on.
And then can you just speak to the decision to focus on the ELA for the program?
Is it working? Yay. Yes, we were needing to make choices so that we don't overwhelm our students. Many times, the students that need the reading services are the same that need the math, and so we needed to pick an emphasis, and we felt that reading would be able to support us later with math. We'd love to do both, but we find that staffing would not be available for both, and we wanted to really focus on one specific area so that we could really capitalize on such a short period of time.
Okay, and then for the kids that are maybe struggling with math in elementary, do you have any recommendations on what they should do? Like maybe they don't need the ELA.
We have a couple of things going on right now at the sites. Our principals and our teachers are very aware of who the students are. So the summer boost is in addition to what goes on here. So we'll continue to monitor. We don't have anything systematic that we can do for them over the summer, but it's not something that we just leave to the side, forgotten. We'll continue to provide tier 2 and 3 services for our students. We actually have our principal, one of ours today. Anything to add?
We were discussing for summer for kids who, for whatever reason, either they don't have a gap in ELA or they're unable to come to summer school for whatever reason. One of our programs, iReady, we were looking at today, ensuring that, there's always that time in the summer with some of our interventions where they're flipping over the data from our database. So there's like a few weeks in a window where it's not available. But we were seeking out today to get some clarity on, for kids who can't come to summer school or it's not an option for them for whatever reason, they have their computers, we could still be monitoring that data at an intervention. It's super pivotal data as we're getting ready for the beginning of the school year, whether they're in summer school. Ideally, they'd be in summer school, but if not, what could we have? So we had that conversation today specific around iReady for the schools who have it, but if not, then what are some resources we can provide to parents, whether it's a choice board, whether it's some things that we can say, regardless if you're with us this summer, here are some things we can do that's not just busy work, but that we can track.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other board member questions or comments? 2 quick questions. First, 2,195 students, D or F or ungraded. Is that higher or lower than average? Is it what we would expect in a normal year, or is that much higher due to COVID?
We have Dr. Bachner with us, but it is higher than in years past.
And grades in general, are they higher or lower than what we would expect? Are you able to make a comment about that?
I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me, but Dr. Bachner did do an analysis of that we can get to you of the students from year to year, what percentage are A's, B's, C's, and D's by campus. So we can get that data to you, but I don't have it in front of me to.
I believe we were given that data. I just want for the public's benefit, is that higher or lower than, what was it in general, higher or lower than what we would expect?
I recall that there were more A's this year than typical, but there was also definitely more D's and F's, and then students also that were not engaged in learning. So if they're at-home learners, and we're calling them, asking them to engage in the learning, and they're not. And that are the students that have the increase in incompletes, that are just, they're at home and they're not participating, and that's really difficult. So that's when we're really contacting the families and the students, and that's what we've seen an increase in.
Thank you. To Board Member Hartwell's point about students feeling that they are cared for, that is one of the really important functions, not only of the SEL education, but also of the opportunities we provide in our district. There are many students who might not otherwise attend school if we didn't have music class for them, or theater, or CTE programs, and other extracurricular activities that really bring them into our school and make them feel at home. And I did not comment on this earlier, but I do want to say that personally, I was disheartened by the comments about million-dollar homes and properties, because up until very recently, Coronado High School, if you went there on a rainy day, was flooded everywhere. It was not a school that, unless you were engaged with the teachers, and the teachers worked very hard with those students, but outside of that campus, I doubt many of those students felt that this board or the administration at the time or anyone in our community cared much about them. But we have fixed those, and we are working to fix those things, and we have a lot of gaps that we need to make up for, and we know that those gaps exist. So I'm happy with the work that's being done. I am happy with the views and positive attitude of the administration to address those and right those wrongs, and I look forward to all that we can achieve in the coming year. Any additional comments? Board Member Beckman and then Board Member Hartwells.
Yeah, the chart you referenced, and I don't know if it's the same one that I'm asking for, but we were provided a chart by school after the first quarter when we were virtual, comparing 1920 to 2021, middle schools and high schools for ELA and math, showing the percentages of Fs, et cetera. That was really informative as far as our decision-making. So if we could get an updated version with regard to the semester end and kind of keep that going so we can see progress, et cetera, and then maybe speak to identify those incompletes too, because this did not have that on there, it just had Fs. So I've asked Dr. Menzel for that, and I know that he's looking at them.
Absolutely.
Board Member Hartwells.
Could you comment on whether you considered a tutoring corps as one component of summer offerings?
So we have talked about all different approaches, and the Beyond Move On When Reading is specific to a more individualized and small group approach. We are concerned about how many teachers we're going to get, and so the Summer Boost, we're really excited about the whole group, small group, SEL, so we can optimize the teachers that we get. So yes, we did talk about that, and we also talked about the ability to scale to meet all the needs. So it's a balance.
Are there any further board member questions or comments? Dr. Menzel, do you have any further questions or comments?
And no further comments.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for answering our questions. The board will now move to agenda item 8, consent agenda. The chair moves to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there a second? Yeah, there will be time for comment. Is there a second to the motion? It is moved and seconded, Board Member Hartwell seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there any further debate?
Not debate, but comment.
Comment.
Okay.
Vice President Sinowski.
Thank you. I would actually like to, in looking through specifically B, which is the acceptance of gifts, I know for those of us that see these numbers on a regular basis, it sometimes gets overlooked at the significance these gifts play and the role they play in educating our students' lives. And so I'd like to take a moment to thank our PTOs for their continued work in SUSD, specifically to Governing Board Member Beckman for her continued work with the Scottsdale Foundation and the Charos for their continued financial support for students and staff. Like I said, it's a lot of money and it means a lot to our students to be successful. And then on F, which is the personal action items, I'm going to ask that we please, let's make certain that all of our listed and approved separations are carefully followed up on, and individuals that are parting ways with SUSD are surveyed to share their experience with our district, because I do believe we can learn best when we listen. Well, that's all I have to say.
Do any other board members have any questions or comments about the consent agenda as amended? I would just say that I second Vice President Sinowski's comments. Again, going back to gifts that are given to us, there are a lot of things we simply could not do without it. We are one of the lowest paid lowest funded states for public education, and these gifts are crucial to hiring support staff, to providing additional opportunities for students, even if it is baseball nights on the field, things that our students can really enjoy and benefit from. So thank you. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended, say aye. Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The consent agenda as amended is approved. We will now move to agenda item 8I, approval of amendment to intergovernmental agreement with Arizona Department of Economic Security for transition from school to work services. Board Member Beckman.
Thank you. The reason I pulled this wasn't because I don't want it to pass or be approved by the governing board. It just, I thought it merited being set aside for Dr. Sackos to give us a 30-second kind of discussion on this type of program and why it's important to our district.
Absolutely. This program is otherwise known as SCORE, which is Scottsdale Community Opportunity for Real-World Education. These are identified special education students to go into a setting that they really work on real-life skill sets for the workforce, and not just any job, but for competitive employment. The first 2 years of this grant opportunity, and we're in the end of year 4, was held at the down the street here at our city building down the street. However, that has since been moved to Arcadia High School, and the SCORE opportunity not only provides great opportunities for our kids to be ready for a competitive workforce, but it's also it's great to have that type of diversity on our campuses as well, and the kids supporting the campus.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions or comments on agenda item 8I, approval of amendment to the IGA? The chair moves to approve agenda item 8A, approval of amendment to intergovernmental agreement with Arizona Department of Economic Security for transition from school to work services. Is there a second?
Second.
Board Member Beckman seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve agenda item 8A as presented. Is there any further discussion?
Did you say 8A or 8I?
8I, apologies, 8I as presented. Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Is there any further discussion? No. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. The board will now move to agenda item 9A, public comments on action items. Are there any additional cards? No. The board will now move to agenda item 10A, action item approve employee contract forms and listed benefits. Dr. Menzel.
The Finance and Facilities Committee met twice, once at the end of February, once at the beginning of March, to review these contracts in terms of the form and structure. And after that, we brought them forward for governing board consideration, and we would recommend approval this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Dr. Bowman, would you like to speak to the administrative contracts?
What I would like to mention is that new from the last time we were here is we added forms for new hires, and that wasn't embedded in the original contracts, but it allows us to keep things clean from our existing staff compared to our new hires, specifically around the retention incentive. So that's why we had to add those new forms for all of our new hires. So you'll see double forms, you'll see, including our, the forms that you approved at the last meeting. So we've added all of those new forms for new hires to supplement what you did last time and to include all of the administrative contracts as well. That's all I wanted to point out.
Thank you.
Are there any board member questions or comments? Vice President Sanowski.
For overall on this particular topic, okay, yes, I do have some comments to make. First of all, I'd like to thank Board Member Lindsay for his continued work on details and data often left closed to the public eye and rightfully brought forth into public view now. This is not, what I'm about to say is not specific about people, but about a system which we have fed. I speak out of respect for all employees, and I state my dismay to the details for cabinet-level compensation presented. It demonstrates great financial and compensatory benefit and advantage well above and beyond any other personnel category in our district. I do not support this type of practice, and I believe we need to place our financial priorities closer to our students and work towards prioritizing a more just and fair compensation system for all of our employees. We can't say we support all employees when we pay some below poverty level and provide greatest benefit to those working furthest from our priority, our students. I'm concerned about our practice of compensation, and I do understand that we are committed to the adjustments, and I hope to see this work in the future.
Thank you, Vice President Sanowski. Are there any further comments or questions? I appreciate the Vice President's comments, and I believe that, and I do thank the Finance Committee, Facilities and Finance Committee for working together. That includes Board Member Hartwells and Board Member Lindsay, as well as Dr. Menzel, Dr. Bowman, and other members, correct? Shannon, thank you, our Chief Financial Officer. A lot of hard work, I know, into evaluating these benefits and aligning those benefits ultimately with our strategic plan will be an important aspect of that. And again, I would refer back to Mark Tucker's comments on leading high-performing school districts and how we compensate all levels of staff for the work they do and the advantages they take. The one comment I would have in the existing agreements that we were approving today for administrative levels with the retention payment, I must apologize to my colleagues on the board. I believe the retention payment discussion got a little bit confusing at the last meeting, and that was my fault. And I should have brought in Dr. Menzel, who might have been able to better explain what that discussion was. So I apologize for that. Personally, I voted to approve that specific amendment because ultimately I felt that was the direction the board was going. But I do disagree with the timing of the payments. Unfortunately, there is not much that can be done now if other members now agree. And I appreciate that, again, that there was confusion around that point. That is my fault, so I take responsibility for that. Are there any further questions or comments about these contracts as they have been presented? Dr. Menzel, do you have any questions or comments?
No further comments at this point.
The chair moves to approve action item 10A, approve employee contract forms and listed benefits as presented. Is there a second? Board Member Hartwell seconds. It is moved and seconded that the board approve action item 10A, approve employee contract forms and listed benefits as presented. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. I believe I heard all five, correct? The board will now move to agenda item 11. Board members may propose topics for future consideration. Are there any topics for future consideration? Board Member Beckman.
Yeah, I've, this year that I've suggested this, but I have in the past. I would love to have a discussion item centering around special education and to hear from that department and really get a grasp on how they've navigated this COVID environment and where our students are now and how we could best support them.
Are there any other board member requests for future agenda items? Board Member Hartwells.
I have two. A first being perhaps a policy committee and/or a facilities and finance committee review of the cash accounts min and maximums that are set by policy, which are in part being operated outside of policy, as I understand it. So I think an evaluation of the current policy and its appropriateness, and perhaps a recommendation of whether to either amend or some kind of proposal to become, more compliant within the scope of what these mins and maxes are on the cash accounts. I will defer to Dr. Menzel in terms of how you'd like to proceed. If you'd like to refer those to committee discussions before coming to the board, however you wish to proceed, but I'd like at some point for us to have that conversation. A second one, I would appreciate a baseline presentation of the academic outcomes along the lines of what we discussed earlier, which would include, for example, grade progressions, graduation rates, attendance, disciplinary data such as suspensions, which Dr. Sackos referred to today generally, as well as test scores. And again, defer to you, Dr. Menzel, and what you think an appropriate proxy on terms of test scores or a comprehensive set of test scores, so that we may have a baseline of where we are on academic outcomes, particularly salient going into the summer and after the year we've had.
My only comment is I believe the cash account minimum and maximum numbers is a regulation, so not approved by the board, and therefore should probably be something that the Finance and Facilities Committee would review at some point. That would be my only comment on that point. Are there any additional, Vice President Sanowski?
Yes, thank you. I want us to be really good neighbors. You know, we've had the conversation about the lights at Chaparral. I know we were told that there was an inclusive process of trying to reach out to the neighbors. Another issue that's come to our attention as a board recently was the Tanalea Elementary, the Oak facility, and this snack proposal. You know, whether we feel like we're really including, I think that's the hardest thing we face continually is communication with our community and within our neighborhoods. So when we are making decisions on neighborhoods, I think we need to be really, really deliberate. I feel like no matter what we do, we're not doing enough with communication. So to be the good neighbor, I don't know what it's going to be, what it's going to look like, but I think we need to be better at it. I know I didn't give you much on that, but our outreach cannot just be through the internet or inviting people to a meeting. Some people don't have the computers. I'd also like for us to, I had discussed before this idea of an equity audit, and that doesn't just include human beings, but that also includes our facilities and our offerings. So I would again like to propose that we do some type of an equity audit, as school districts have done throughout the United States, to identify and rectify some of these inequities that do exist in our school district. I'd like for us to also discuss very quickly what the plans are for the high school advancement celebrations so that the community can prepare for that. And then I also would like to hear from, aside from special education, that was also on my list, I'd like to hear from the different employee groups before the end of this school year. I'd like to hear from their representatives and their leaders as far as what went well this year, and then what they can learn, what we've learned about what we can do better at. That was a lot, I realize.
I think, Dr. Menzel, the communication outreach, Good Neighbors could be put to the Marketing and Communication Committee.
Yep.
Which I'm not sure if any of those meetings have been scheduled yet, but that is something I think.
March 31st, I
March
think is our
31st.
first one, yeah.
And then the equity audit, I believe that could probably be done by the Diversity Committee, correct? The rest certainly can be brought forward, and the employee group update, I believe, is in line with our decision to bring employee groups at the beginning of meetings, like we do with the Student Advisory Board. Are there any further requests for agenda items? Board Member Hart-Wells.
Yes, thank you. I had been reviewing a presentation from May 5th of 2020 regarding the deployment of the Title I funds. And also with that context, I would be interested in an update, a status of the intergenerational tutoring program that was proposed at that time, and the any kind of outputs of the McKinney-Vento family engagement component under the Title I funding. I'd also be interested in what our per pupil spending is. And in particular, we heard rave reviews about the Beyond, in my head I've nicknamed it the Beyond program, the Reading Yes program. I would also like to hear what types of outcomes have resulted from what sounds like a very successful program that's been implemented there. And then lastly, this is not an agenda item, although I was remiss in not providing my kudos to Dr. Menzel earlier, and I did that in executive session, but I would like to do that publicly in thanking you for your service to the district, to our community, and to our students and to our teachers and staff, in particularly crazy times, which none of us were prepared for, and you have navigated that with grace and professionalism, so thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further board member questions or comments? The board will now move to agenda item 12, dates of upcoming meetings. Our next meeting is Tuesday, April 6, 2021 at 6 p.m. It is a special governing board meeting at the MDA. Then our following meeting is Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 at 6 p.m. That is a regular governing board meeting here at the MDA. The board will now move to agenda item 13, governing board reports. Do any board members have governing board reports? Board member Beckman.
I'll keep this short. I know this has gone long. Had a great tour of our wonderful Copper Ridge property, and I wanted to say I had a chance to sit down with Principal Eierman, and he was everything everyone said he was. He's great, and I'm very much looking forward to our first meeting of the Marketing and Communications Committee so that we can market the heck out of that school. They've got some great things going on. Second thing is to give a shout out to Ann Oxinger at Saguaro for allowing me to essentially take over one of her larger classrooms with my Project Prom dresses. As I've mentioned to all of you, we didn't have prom last year, and I began collecting with many people, including Board Member Shanowski at the time. And little by little over the year, I've been going in that room, and community members have still been donating, and so I have 1,500 dresses hanging on racks in that room for eventually when we hope to have a prom. This is my plea that I have no menswear. So should anyone feel like they'd like to donate any menswear to our future prom-going men, I would appreciate it and gladly take it. So,
Thank you, Board Member Beckman. Are there any additional board member reports? The chair moves to adjourn this. Oh,
I said or not.
oh, do you have one? Vice President Sanowski, apologies. I don't know how I missed you. I apologize for that.
I did have the great opportunity I've been on every campus, and I say that because I think all of our campuses are very unique, and I can't wait for our marketing group and everyone to get hired and put in place because we've got a lot of great things going on. I think we just need to be better about telling the great stuff that we have going on in our community. I did have the opportunity to attend a couple ASBA webinars. One I thought was very interesting. It was how to engage your community to overcome barriers to trust. The other was leading for equity. And then I continue to work with Leaders for Just Schools, supported by the National Education Association. That has been the best professional development I have ever participated in as an educator and as a citizen. It's great work, and it's going to continue. And I will get you some menswear.
And I apologize again, Vice President Sanowski, for missing you. Are there any additional board member reports? Board Member Lindsay.
I just want to take a second to thank Dr. Menzel and the cabinet and Dr. Sweeney and IT for putting that tech request in the last communication that went out right before spring break. That is just really appreciated.
With that, the chair moves to adjourn this regular meeting of the Scottsdale Unified Number 48 Governing Board at 7:58 p.m. Is there a second?
second.
Board Member Hartwell seconds. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. The motion carries 5-0. This meeting is adjourned at 7:59 p.m.